My parents tried to steal my big promotion and give it to my cousin, but my manager said, "Funny, you're way more qualified." I've always been someone who kept to herself. Not shy, just careful. Observant. Growing up, I learned pretty early on that being loud, proud, or overly excited about anything made people in my family, specifically, uncomfortable. My parents weren't warm people. They were driven, status-focused, and had a clear image in mind of what a successful family looked like. The kind with Christmas cards from exotic ski resorts, brunches at country clubs, and kids who graduated top of their class, preferably from a recognized university. I was the kid who made that image possible. Quietly, dutifully, and without complaints. While I stayed up finishing essays, worked part-time through college, and networked like my future depended on it, because it did, my cousin Bryson, well, he just existed. Bryson is my mom's sister's son. He grew up a couple of towns over in Winston-Salem. Unlike me, Bryson was adored. Always forgiven. Always explained away. He was just creative, going through a phase, or a little distracted. Meanwhile, I was expected to perform, produce, and make no noise while doing so. Still, I said nothing. I built my life the way I wanted, slowly, but intentionally. After finishing my MBA, I landed a job at a large consumer branding firm based in Atlanta. That was 14 years ago. Today, I'm still there but a lot higher up. I carved out a solid reputation, survived layoffs, led key campaigns, and became known for my strategic mind and steady leadership. Most people who knew me assumed I already had an executive-level position. But it wasn't until recently that I was finally up for it. Director of Strategic Brand Initiatives. Just the name made me feel like everything I had worked for was finally adding up. I hadn't told my parents. That probably sounds strange, but if you grew up the way I did, you understand. I knew deep down that they wouldn't be proud, they'd find a way to make it about them. Or worse, about Bryson. And like clockwork, they did. A few weeks before the final round of interviews for the promotion, my mom called. It was a normal, almost boring conversation. How was I? Was I eating enough? Did I hear that Bryson was planning a move to Atlanta? She said it all in that fake sweet tone that always preceded some kind of ask. I played along. I didn't say anything about the promotion. But I should have known. Because less than a week later, Bryson reached out. Asked to grab dinner. Said he was in town scoping out opportunities. I figured, okay, maybe it's harmless. Maybe he's trying to be independent. I had always kept my distance from him, but I didn't hate the guy. We had nothing in common, but I was polite. Over dinner, he went on about how hard it was to find meaningful work. Said he had experience in marketing, he had one internship after college that he quit halfway through. Then he casually mentioned, "Your company has some great roles coming up, right? I heard there's some kind of director opening?" That stopped me cold. I hadn't told a single soul outside of work. How do you know that? I asked. Oh, Aunt Denise mentioned it. She said you'd probably be great for it, or someone like me. I laughed, but not because it was funny. It was a reflex. My stomach turned. The next morning, I called my mom. Did you tell Bryson about the promotion? Silence. Then, don't be like that, Marissa. We just thought he should know about opportunities. He's your cousin. You can help. My jaw clenched. Help? You think I should help him get the job I've been working toward for over a decade? Oh honey, she said with a tired sigh. You've already proven yourself. You have enough. He needs this. I ended the call. But they weren't done. About 3 days later, my manager Rebecca called me into her office. She was calm, but I noticed the manila folder already open on her desk. We received an interesting email this morning, she said. It was a letter of recommendation. From my father. He had emailed the executive leadership team directly. Said his nephew Bryson would be a perfect fit for the new director role. Claimed that I had endorsed him as well. That I was stepping aside because family comes first. I was stunned. My body went cold. Rebecca raised her eyebrows. Was this your idea? I shook my head. Absolutely not. I had no idea they were even aware of the opening until a few days ago. She studied me for a moment. Then said, with a hint of a smile, funny. Because you're way more qualified. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Relief poured over me, but also something darker. Rage. They had actually tried to take it from me. After all these years of silence, of shrinking myself to fit their perfect little world, they still believed I didn't deserve what I had earned. And they were willing to lie to my company to give it to someone who'd never put in the work. The promotion came through a few days later. Official. Signed. Sealed. I didn't tell them. Not at first. But of course, they found out. My mother sent me a long message. It started as a congratulations, but quickly turned. She was disappointed in my selfishness. Said Bryson was crushed. Said I had lost sight of family values. My dad? He didn't bother with subtlety. His email was titled Disappointment and accused me of throwing away our family's future for personal gain. I didn't respond to either. Instead, I started packing for my first overseas business trip. Berlin. Then London. My new role came with international exposure and clients across multiple time zones. I was building something real. Something no one could take from me. Something they never helped build. I'd never felt more powerful. Or more alone. But it was the good kind of alone, the kind where your boundaries are clear, and you no longer have to apologize for having them. After Berlin, I spent 10 days in London onboarding a new client that was expanding its retail presence in the southern US. My team back in Atlanta was handling things smoothly without me, and for the first time in years, I wasn't worried about checking my email every 5 minutes. I had worked hard to build a team I could trust, and they respected me because I never asked them to do anything I wouldn't do myself. That kind of leadership had become rare, apparently. Late one evening, after a particularly long dinner with the client's regional marketing director, I sat alone in my hotel room with a glass of Pinot Noir and opened my personal email, something I'd been avoiding. 37 unread messages. Most were junk or promotional subscriptions I kept meaning to unsubscribe from. But a few were from my mother. One had no subject. Just, I'm worried about you. Another read, you're being unfair. And then the last one, more recent, don't let success make you bitter. We're your parents. It's funny how manipulative people can make themselves sound concerned when they're really just angry that they lost control. My phone lit up a few seconds later. A call from my Aunt Bryson's mom. I let it ring. But the voicemail that followed played automatically over the Bluetooth speaker I forgot to disconnect. Her voice was that same southern soft kind I grew up hearing at Sunday lunches and poolside family cookouts. But now it grated on me. Hey, Marissa. I just wanted to say I don't understand what happened between you and your folks, but I think this whole thing's gotten way out of hand. Bryson's hurt. He thought you were going to help him get a foot in the door, not cut him out completely. He's your family. Please, just think about that. You've got your big job now, you've made it. Maybe now you can reach back and pull someone else up. Reach back? I thought. I've been climbing with broken fingers. And they stood at the bottom, watching, telling me not to look too proud while doing it. When I flew back to Atlanta, my apartment felt colder than usual. I stood in the hallway longer than normal, shoes still on, briefcase in hand, just staring. Not at anything in particular. Maybe just the stillness. The kind of stillness you notice only when you've spent weeks among noise and people. The next morning, I walked into the office and noticed something strange. People were looking at me differently. Not with resentment, more like admiration. One of the new junior associates, Aaliyah, approached me near the elevator. I read the campaign case study you worked on for Kixley, she said. It's brilliant. I didn't know half of those things about regional segmentation. I thanked her, surprised she'd taken the time. That moment stuck with me not because she complimented me, but because it reminded me of why I worked so hard. It wasn't just about status or revenge. I actually liked mentoring younger women in the field. Showing them they didn't have to accept crumbs while someone less competent got the whole pie just because they were someone's son or nephew. That same week, HR forwarded me another odd email. This time, it was from Bryson. A formal job inquiry, addressed to whom it may concern, with a resume that was, to put it kindly, thin. He listed independent consulting as his current occupation. No clients mentioned. No measurable results. No references. And still he had the audacity to name-drop me in the opening paragraph. My cousin, Marissa Dalton, has spoken highly of the company and believes I'd be a cultural fit. I never said that. HR asked if I had referred him. I told them the truth, no. I haven't spoken with him about working here. I don't endorse this application. That seemed to settle it. At least for them. But that small boundary setting created an avalanche at home. My mom called this time from my dad's phone. Probably hoping I wouldn't block it. When I didn't pick up, she texted, "Why are you doing this to him? What did Bryson ever do to you?" That one stung not because I felt guilty, but because it showed how far removed they were from reality. What had Bryson ever done to me? He'd taken every opportunity given to him and squandered it. He coasted through school because teachers were told he's gifted. He got his first real job through a friend of my father's and lost it in 6 months due to personality clashes. He never called to congratulate me when I got promoted but had no problem attaching his name to my success when it suited him. And still, they expected me to help him. Just because he shared our bloodline. I remember sitting on my couch that Friday evening, staring at the ceiling and thinking, what is family supposed to mean? Is it unconditional support? A safety net? A contract? Because if it's a contract, I was breaking mine. That weekend, I made a decision I'd been considering for a long time. I booked a therapy session. Virtual, just to start. I'd been juggling too many emotions in silence for too long. The therapist, whose name was Jolene, asked me a simple question that stayed with me. What would happen if you stopped trying to make them proud? The silence between that question and my answer felt like years. I'd probably breathe easier, I said. And I did. I stopped replying to guilt-tripping emails. I didn't return voicemails that ended with emotional blackmail. I sent a short, polite message to HR formally disassociating myself from any applicants claiming a personal referral from me. I told them if someone named Bryson Whitley applied again, they had my permission to discard it without review. It was like pulling out a thorn I'd forgotten was still stuck in my skin. I started walking to work in the mornings instead of driving. I slept through the night more often. I even laughed during meetings, real laughter, not the forced kind that comes from politeness. My mother, however, didn't give up easily. A few weeks later, I got a handwritten letter in the mail. It was rare. She hated writing anything by hand. The letter was 5 pages long. The first 2 pages were classic mom, condescending encouragement dressed up as concern. How I was acting like a stranger, how we're only trying to help, how I was letting your success change who you are. But the 3rd page? That's where it turned. She accused me of having a corporate mind poisoned by Western individualism. That I was becoming cold and self-absorbed. She said Bryson was going through enough already without me hampering his future. I stopped reading there. I folded the letter in half, slid it back into the envelope, and put it in the back of a drawer I don't open often. Some people delete things. I prefer to keep them physical reminders of why I chose peace. I didn't respond. Instead, I went to brunch with a couple of friends from work. I smiled. I told them about Berlin and the new campaign I was excited about. I let them toast me for the promotion, even though it had been a month. And for once, I didn't feel guilty. Not for growing. Not for protecting myself. Not for choosing a life that didn't revolve around people who only loved me when I was useful. The summer rolled in with its usual Atlanta heat, sticky, unrelenting, and oddly comforting. It reminded me of my childhood summers in North Carolina. Except this time, I wasn't sweating in a cramped kitchen helping my mother prep for another exhausting family reunion. I was on my balcony, coffee in hand, reading through a proposal from our London team on an upcoming cross-branding initiative. The contrast wasn't lost on me. I was no longer the version of myself that sat quietly in family living rooms, listening to stories about Bryson's latest venture while my own accomplishments were ignored or dismissed. That version had retired quietly, without a farewell party. Work was fulfilling. Not easy, but fulfilling. I had finally earned a seat at the table, and it turned out that the view from there was a lot less intimidating than I'd imagined. I wasn't an imposter, I was prepared. Years of thankless jobs, late nights, navigating office politics, and getting passed over had forged me into someone who belonged in this chair. And yet, despite all of it, family has a way of creeping back in. It was around mid-June when my father called me at the office. A rare move, he almost never contacted me directly unless it was serious. I let it go to voicemail. That night, I sat at my desk, lights dimmed, the rest of the floor already cleared out, and listened to the message. His voice was tired. Not angry. Just tired. "Marissa, I don't want this to continue. Your mother's upset. Your aunt is furious. Bryson's talking about moving back home. I know things got messy. But I want us to come back together. Your family. We don't abandon each other." There it was again. That word. Family. And every time they said it, it sounded less like comfort and more like a leash. The next morning, I replied via email. Short. Polite. "I'm open to having a conversation. But it needs to be an honest one. And on my terms." I didn't expect him to agree. But he did. We met at a coffee shop in Midtown. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. I wore a blazer, not because I needed to, but because I knew it would bother him to see me so put together. He was already seated, coffee in hand, eyes on the window. When he saw me, he smiled, but there was hesitation behind it. He looked older than I remembered. We made small talk. The kind of awkward pleasantries that fill space between people who've shared years but not intimacy. Then he got to the point. "I didn't know your mother was going to write that letter." I believed him. "But you knew about the email," I said. "The one you sent to my company." He sighed. "I thought I was helping. Bryson's struggling." He still is. "And you thought the solution was to give him my job?" "Not yours. Just a job. A foot in the door." I leaned back. "You do understand how that looks, right? That you tried to leverage your relationship with me to sneak someone into a position they weren't qualified for?" He said nothing. "I built this," I continued, gesturing vaguely. "From nothing. No favors. No shortcuts. And instead of being proud, you tried to take it away. I didn't mean to take anything away from you. But you did. Not the job I got. But the trust. Whatever small piece of it was left." He stared down at his cup. There was a long silence before he spoke again. "Your mother. She just wants the family to stay close. You moved away, focusing on your career. It felt like you were leaving us behind." I wasn't leaving anyone behind. I was trying to survive. That landed. He nodded, slowly. "Maybe we didn't see that. We parted without resolution. No hugs. No promises. Just an awkward handshake and a vague 'let's talk again soon,' that both of us knew might never happen. But I felt lighter. It wasn't closure, but it was something. A shift. A week later, I was in the middle of a team strategy session when a Slack message popped up from Aaliyah. "Hey, sorry to interrupt, was this guy referred to by you?" Attached was an application from Bryson. Again. I opened it. Same resume. Same vague claims. But this time a new cover letter. In it, he wrote, "My cousin, Marissa Dalton, has encouraged me to explore positions here. She speaks highly of the company and said my skills would be a strong asset to the team." That last sentence made my jaw clench. He hadn't just name-dropped me, he'd lied. Again. This wasn't desperation. This was arrogance. Entitlement. And a refusal to respect boundaries no matter how clearly they were drawn. I replied to Aaliyah, "No, I have not endorsed him. Please disregard the application." She responded with a simple thumbs-up emoji. I stared at my monitor for a few minutes after that, my fingers hovering above the keyboard, heart pounding not from fear or shame but from disbelief. He hadn't learned. They still hadn't learned. I took a breath and opened a new email window. This time, I addressed it to my parents and my aunt. Subject: Respect my boundaries. This will be my only message on this matter. Bryson has now applied to my company twice, using my name without my consent. That is unacceptable and unethical. I will not endorse him. I will not help him. This is not a reflection of who he is as a person, it's a reflection of what he has not done, worked, built, failed, tried again, and earned anything. I have worked too hard for too long to have my professional reputation tied to someone who thinks family is a free pass. I am not punishing anyone. I am protecting myself. That is what adults do. Please do not contact me about this again. Marissa. I didn't check for a response. I closed my laptop and stepped out into the hallway, walking past the rows of desks and into the break room, where a few junior staff were laughing over something on someone's phone. It felt distant, like another world. A freer one. One I was finally part of on my own terms. The fallout from that email came in waves. At first, silence. No calls. No responses. No dramatics. It was eerily quiet in the days that followed, as if they were regrouping, deciding on their next move. I half expected a furious voicemail or a hand-delivered letter wrapped in guilt. But nothing came. And that absence, well, it was both a relief and a sadness I hadn't anticipated. Then, about 10 days later, my aunt broke the silence. A short email landed in my inbox with the subject line, "You didn't have to embarrass us." I didn't open it right away. I sat with it for a full hour while I prepared data sets for a client debrief, each keystroke echoing louder in my ears than usual. It was strange, the way something so small, a notification on a screen, could crack the calm I'd built. When I finally read it, I wasn't surprised. "You could have just told us privately. Bryson's been really down. He said you made him look like a joke. He's already going through a lot, and you know how hard it is for him to ask for help. I thought you, of all people, would understand what it's like to be unsupported." Unsupported. That word burned. She had no idea. None of them did. All my life, I'd been supporting myself. Emotionally. Financially. Mentally. Carrying expectations while being offered nothing in return except the demand to be quiet about how heavy they were. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to my personal inbox, labeled it family, and archived it. I'd been doing that lately, creating a digital trail of things I chose not to carry, but didn't want to forget. A quiet record of why I finally let go. That same week, Rebecca, my boss, called me into her office. Not for anything bad, just one of our monthly check-ins. We talked numbers, staffing needs, and a few cross-departmental challenges. But then she leaned back and gave me a long, assessing look. "You've been quiet lately," she said. I hesitated. "Just managing noise from outside of work." She nodded slowly. "You know, I've been in your shoes. When I was promoted to partner at my last firm, my own sister accused me of forgetting where I came from. People think success changes us, but really, it just peels back the curtain on who they've always been." That stuck with me. Because it was true. My parents hadn't changed. Bryson hadn't changed. They had just finally hit the limits of what I was willing to tolerate. I left that meeting feeling seen in a way I rarely was outside of work. And I realized my real life wasn't with my family anymore. It was here. With my team, my projects, my slowly forming community of friends who didn't measure my worth by how much I bent to accommodate them. One of those friends was Camille, our digital strategy lead. She was the first person I'd really started to open up to. Mid-40s, divorced, with a teenage daughter and the kind of no-nonsense attitude I admired. We had bonded over a late-night project months earlier and had slowly started grabbing coffee, exchanging book recommendations, trading stories about terrible bosses and manipulative family members. One afternoon, she and I took a walk to a nearby bakery. On the way back, I finally told her the full story about the promotion. Not just the Bryson part but the email, the fake referral, the silence that followed. She listened without interrupting. At the end, she said, "They thought you were still that kid who never spoke up. You scared them." Good. I laughed harder than I had in weeks. Later that night, I got a message on Facebook. From Bryson. "Look, I don't know what you think happened, but I didn't ask your parents to email anyone. They did that on their own. I was just trying to start over." I stared at the screen, debating whether to reply. Part of me wanted to rip into him, years of resentment bubbling just beneath the surface. Another part wanted to ignore it, pretend it never arrived. In the end, I typed a single message: "Starting over doesn't mean stepping on other people's work. I wish you well. But don't use my name again." He saw it. Never responded. A few days later, I ran into someone from HR in the break room. She asked casually if things were okay at home. I must have looked confused, because she quickly added, "We've gotten 2 more inquiries from people claiming to be referred to by you. One from a family friend, and another from someone who said you were their mentor." Neither name rang a bell. I told her I hadn't referred anyone since last quarter and definitely hadn't given permission for anyone else to use my name. She took notes, thanked me, and left it at that. But my blood was boiling. My name had become currency in my family, something to be spent, whether or not I consented. A resource they felt entitled to. And now they were extending beyond Bryson. A friend? A mentee? It didn't take much guesswork. My mother had a habit of bragging to her book club and church ladies about her high-achieving daughter in corporate leadership. I could imagine her offering my name as a golden ticket to anyone who flattered her long enough. That night, I called a lawyer. Not because I wanted to sue anyone, but because I needed to know what my options were. I wasn't naive, this could affect my career. My reputation. The company's trust in me. The consultation was clear: I had grounds to send a cease and desist if the impersonations continued. I could document everything. I could protect myself. And for once, I would. I drafted a letter. Formal. Professional. Not angry, just firm. It outlined the incidents of misuse, the risks to my professional integrity, and a clear statement: any further attempt to use my name or misrepresent an affiliation with me professionally would result in legal action. I sent it to my parents, my aunt, and blind copied the HR rep at my company for documentation. No one responded. But the messages stopped. No new referrals. No family friends reaching out. No thinly veiled sob stories about helping a young man find his path. Just silence. And in that silence, I found peace. Not the kind I used to fantasize about: the tearful reconciliations, the apologies, the overdue recognition, but the kind that came from knowing I had finally set the line in stone. That I wasn't a villain for choosing self-respect. That the world didn't collapse when I stopped making myself small. The summer turned to fall, and with it came new projects, new clients, and a sharper version of myself than I'd ever known. I was no longer cautiously proud of my achievements, I was confidently proud. I didn't apologize for my success in meetings, didn't shrink my voice in rooms full of executives, and most importantly, I stopped feeling guilty for keeping certain people at arm's length. In October, I was invited to be a panelist at a major Women in Leadership Summit in Chicago. I almost turned it down out of pure imposter syndrome. Old habits die hard, but Camille talked me into it. People need to hear how you got here, she said. Especially the part where you didn't let leeches pull you back down. So I went. And it was one of the best weekends of my life. I spoke about career growth, setting boundaries, and how to recognize when loyalty turns into self-hampery. I even told a redacted version of the Bryson story, changing names, of course, but when I looked out at the audience, I saw nods, tears, and a few knowing smirks. I wasn't alone in what I had gone through. At the networking lunch afterward, a senior editor from a mid-tier business magazine pulled me aside. She said she was working on a feature about women in corporate leadership whose greatest hurdles came from their own families. Would I be interested? I paused. Then said yes. The article was published a month later. It didn't name names. It didn't shame anyone. But it painted a very real picture of what happens when your success threatens people who once held power over you. The piece went viral in certain circles. Not global fame or anything, but it definitely made its rounds among industry folks. My inbox was flooded for weeks. Women from all walks of life thanking me, sharing their own stories, asking for advice. Even a few former coworkers from earlier in my career reached out. One said, "I always knew you were playing chess while the rest of us were trying not to get fired." That one made me laugh for hours. But the most unexpected reaction? My mother. She didn't email me directly. She emailed Camille. Apparently, she tracked her down through the company's public site and wrote a long message accusing her of encouraging bitterness and separating our daughter from her roots. Camille, in her usual composed style, forwarded me the message with the subject line, "Your mother is something else." I didn't respond to my mother. But the email confirmed something I had suspected for months: she was watching me. They all were. They'd stopped reaching out directly, but they were following my every move. Reading my posts. Searching for cracks. But there were none left. A month after the article, I got an invitation I didn't expect. My high school was hosting a 20-year reunion gala, and I had been asked to speak briefly as a featured alum. Normally I would have ignored something like that, but I had a feeling that certain family members would be in attendance. So I went. I didn't wear anything dramatic, just a well-cut navy dress, heels, and quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. The event was in Raleigh. I flew in that afternoon, arrived alone, and walked into the venue with the posture of someone who didn't owe anyone a damn thing. As I made my way toward the check-in table, I saw my aunt across the room. She saw me too. Her mouth parted in that half-smile she always wore when trying to appear gracious. My parents were with her, my father standing rigid beside the punch table, my mother mid-conversation with someone who looked vaguely familiar from my childhood church. I nodded at them. That was all. The speech came near the end of the program. 5 minutes. I kept it clean, simple, and elegant. I talked about resilience. About carving paths in industries that don't always make space for women, especially ones who come from families that expect them to succeed silently, invisibly. When I stepped off the podium, the applause wasn't thunderous, but it was genuine. And as I took a sip of my water and scanned the room, I saw my mother's expression. Tight-lipped. Frozen. And above all else, defeated. There was no confrontation. No drama. Just a simple truth hanging in the air: I had won. Not through vengeance. Not through cruelty. But through thriving in full view of people who rooted for my failure. Later, as I prepared to leave the event, someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was Bryson. He looked different. Older, yes, but also tired in a way that people get when they've run out of excuses. "Hey," he said, forcing a smile. "I read that article you did. The one about families and pressure. Good stuff." I nodded. "Thanks." He hesitated, then added, I guess I never really got how much harder it was for you. Growing up, I thought. I don't know if you just liked doing things alone. I gave a small laugh. It wasn't a choice. It was survival. He nodded, awkwardly. I'm working a job now. Not glamorous, but steady. I get it now, I think. What it takes. I hope you do, I said. And I meant it. Then I left. No grand send-off. No hugs. Just a simple, quiet exit. Back in Atlanta, I returned to my life with renewed focus. A month later, I was promoted again, this time to VP of Strategic Growth. It was quieter than the last promotion. No drama. No family fallout. Just peace. The final cherry on top came during our annual company retreat. Rebecca announced a new internal mentorship program and asked me to lead it. She wanted me to help shape the next generation of female leaders at the firm. I stood in front of 50 eager young professionals and told them everything I'd learned, not just about branding and metrics but about setting boundaries, owning your narrative, and knowing when to cut ties with people who only love you when you're convenient. As I looked around that room, something clicked into place. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It didn't burn bridges. It was measured. Patient. Strategic. And most of all, it was mine.